Hello, and welcome to CommonHealth, an audio series brought to you by the Virginia Community Healthcare Association. CommonHealth brings together voices from around Virginia and beyond to discuss all aspects of community health, individual health, and well-being. I'm Adrienne Harden, Virginia Community Healthcare Association's registered dietitian and nutritionist. At the heart of several intersecting crises, food insecurity, public health, sustainability, we find an innovative agricultural process: hydroponics. In brief, hydroponics is a form of vertical farming that uses nutrient solutions dissolved in water to grow plants without soil. With hydroponics, fresh vegetables and herbs can be grown anywhere, from homes, schools, and offices to large-scale dedicated facilities. And they can be grown all year round. Hydroponic systems tend to use less space, deter most pests, and save over 90% of water, especially if they recycle their use of water in comparison to traditional agriculture. In this episode, we'll hear from someone who works hands-on with hydroponics every day, Gus Brennan, head grower at Richmond Area Hydroponics Farm, Greenswell Growers. We'll learn more about how this works and understand the incredible benefits for individuals and communities, from nutrition to sustainability to simply reconnecting with the food we eat. Gus, welcome to CommonHealth.
Adrienne, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
I'm excited too. Gus, your history with hydroponics goes all the way back to undergrad when you founded a hydroponics club at Cornell. And to borrow an agricultural phrase, if you will, what cultivated your passion for hydroponics?
Yeah, so the story goes back even further. When I was in my teens, one day my dad brought home something that he had found on the side of the road, and it was like a little hydroponic system called an Aero Garden. And what was really fun about it was, because he found it on the side of the road, a lot of the components were missing, the pump was broken, things like that. So I had to fix up that system to start growing plants in it. And really early on for me, hydroponics and all the technology involved with it was so exciting, because it's not just growing the plants, but for me, it's also all of the equipment and the engineering and the physics that goes behind those systems. So it's a combination of a lot of different disciplines, all boiled down into growing a really good crop that people enjoy and that is sustainable, and a lot of those other things that you mentioned.
Wow, that is so cool. And look at you taking the time to actually, take those parts and put them together and having to start from scratch. That's so cool. So you mentioned a little bit of that technical side. So, could you go a little deeper on what hydroponics is? I know we defined it earlier, and really from that technical perspective, what sets it apart from more traditional forms of agriculture?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this in two parts. Part one is specifically hydroponics. So this is, like you said, growing plants without soil. And there's a lot of different ways that people do hydroponics. You can grow it in peat moss. You could grow it in literally just rocks, or without anything at all, any type of substrate for that plant to grow on. And what we're doing is we're providing all of the nutrients that normally come from the soil through a liquid solution. So water is sent to the plant roots, where the plants get to pick up whatever they want and use it to grow leaves or fruits or stems or whatever your end product goal is. And then the second part of my answer is, we actually call what we do controlled environment agriculture, and it's kind of like an umbrella term, and hydroponics is a technology that's under that umbrella of controlled environment agriculture. And so this is everything from greenhouses, vertical farms, even just simple hoop houses that a lot of more conventional farms will employ. It's any way that we're kind of adding a little bit of control to the system of farming. So in my greenhouse specifically, we control the temperature, the light, the humidity, the CO2, and a lot more things, as well as all of those hydroponic techniques, which help grow our plants, again, super healthy and consistent year round. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into the technology of controlled environment agriculture, and hydroponics is an important part of that.
Wow, that was a new term for me too. I've never heard that term, but it makes perfect sense with everything you're describing. So thank you for sharing that with us. You did answer my question too, Gus. That was awesome. And I would say that, thinking about that controlled aspect where we are changing how we adjust the environment for hydroponics, would you say, or could you answer if vegetables grown via hydroponics are functionally the same or even really, really close to those grown from traditional agriculture? What about, the taste, the texture, freshness? Could you talk about that?
So I think In terms of nutrition, that's a little more tough, and the jury's still out because this is a somewhat new technology, especially when we're talking about leafy greens, which is my area of expertise. This hasn't been done for very long, and so a lot of the studies haven't been done comparing the nutrition to field grown. But I'll take the more established industry of tomatoes in greenhouses as a different example. These guys have been doing it for 30 or 40 years, and nowadays the tomato that you buy in the supermarket is the same as what you're going to get in the field, and maybe even better in terms of flavor or in terms of shelf life. And so what we've experienced in the leafy green space in our greenhouse at Greenswell Growers specifically is we get a much longer shelf life than a field grown product. And that's because we're making sure the plant is super healthy its whole life. And as soon as we harvest it, we cool it down so that it's always cold by the time it gets harvested in our greenhouse until it's on your plate. And so in that way, there's an advantage that we have over a field farm. But I never want to take anything away from field farms. They can grow excellent products. You can grow probably a greater variety of products in a field versus our greenhouse is so specifically designed for what we are growing. But we do hear from customers that they really like the crunchiness and the sweetness of our product, which we're able to deliver 365 days of the year because of the consistency. And so there might be minor differences, but overall, it's kind of like a plant is a plant. And if you have a good grower in a greenhouse, it's going to taste good. And if you have a good grower in the field, it's going to taste good.
Gus, that's amazing. So, I mean, as a nutritionist, that matters so much to me, right? Personally, but also as someone who cares about the patient and the person and the community experience, that also matters, right? So, and even that focus on leafy greens, I'm glad to hear like that's your specialty. And I'm glad that our listeners can know that you specialize in that, because the focus on leafy greens stands out even more because those are considered a powerhouse vegetable. If you look into it, they're super nutrient dense and they score really high. If you look at how the research compares nutrient density in different produce. And so with hydroponics, being able to get more greens, especially year round, like you mentioned, especially getting that taste profile, which I know you guys have mastered. I personally tasted it myself. That's really cool. And that's going to get people excited. So thank you for sharing that with us. So taking all of that into account, Gus, what do you feel like the current state of hydroponics is as it relates to agriculture? So is it going to be even more common than we realize? Do you think that people are going to move more into that space instead of traditional agriculture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really important question and something that we in the industry have had to kind of like educate consumers about. I think sometimes from the outside, like you come in and you've been to our greenhouse, you see it, it looks awesome. And you want to say like, oh, I could grow anything in here. But for us as a business, we have to make sure that the things we grow are profitable. And so right now, there's actually not as many really profitable crops that can be grown in greenhouses or controlled environment agriculture. And I used the example of the tomato industry before, and I really like to use that one because we believe the leafy greens is kind of following that same path, but just about 20 years behind. So in the 90s, maybe 5 to 10% of tomatoes that you would find in a supermarket were grown in a greenhouse. Now that number is more like 90 to 95%. And so tomatoes specifically, they are a high value crop. And so businesses can make a profit growing those in greenhouses. Leafy greens are the same. Leafy greens are expensive. We're aware of that. And we think we offer a really good product. And so it's kind of a premium product that we grow, but we believe it's worth the value and our customers do as well. And so some crops that are those high value crops will continue to be put into greenhouses, but things like corn, soy, wheat, there's just so much what we call broad acreage out in, especially in the Midwest. Those products are grown in an inexpensive way and they're super efficient. Those farmers are excellent at growing those crops. There's not a good reason to move them into a greenhouse because they do so well. Often those products are cooked before they're eaten or they're used as animal feed. So the quality can be a little bit lower than what goes to the supermarket. So again, if you want to look at what crops might become products that are grown in greenhouses and controlled environments, it's usually the higher value crops. Tomatoes, like I said, cucumbers, peppers, now the leafy greens. And up next, there are people now working on berries. Berries are kind of like the new exciting thing for controlled environment agriculture growers because they demand a high price and shelf life is really critical for a good quality product in the supermarket when talking about berries, leafy greens, or again, tomatoes.
That is a cool perspective. I wouldn't have thought about even the progression of why a certain crop would be chosen over another. That's really cool. So tell us more just about Greenswell Growers. And I know I've had the pleasure of being able to visit. And for all of our listeners, if you get a chance to get a tour going with Gus, he's awesome. But can you tell us what hydroponics looks like in action and on that large scale?
Yeah, so we're Greenswell Growers. We are about 30 minutes west of Richmond, and we sell produce both to supermarkets, like Food Lion is one of our great customers. We love working with them. But we're also in a lot of restaurants around the Richmond area, as well as some other cities in the state. So it's actually possible that some of your listeners might have eaten our product and not even be aware of it, which is always really cool. But in terms of the day to day, like my job and what's really important is consistency and maintaining all of the systems that make sure we have really healthy plants. So a lot of what I do is I'm actually just walking around the greenhouse, and it might look like I'm not working, but I promise I am. When I'm listening for things, looking at things, sometimes I grab a leaf and eat it just to make sure everything's right within our spec, our performance is really good. And so that is a big part of what all hydroponics at scale looks like. We call it scouting, but that's time spent in the greenhouse looking at the crop, looking at your environmental settings, your temperature, your humidity, making sure those are right. Whereas in a traditional, even a traditional greenhouse that isn't as, high tech as our greenhouse is, growers and a lot of the labor will be spent moving the crops around, harvesting the crops by hand, watering by hand, things like that. But in our high tech greenhouse, most of that is automated. And so instead of actually going out and watering the plants, I have to tell the system when to water the plants, how much water, how much nutrients to give the plants. And so it's more technically involved, but the ideas and the concepts are the same. And I have spent time in those greenhouses where you water by hand, where you have to go and pick plants by hand and harvest them by hand. And that's really, really critical to be a good grower in a high-tech system, is understanding all the basics, and knowing those is still really important. And if I want to talk about kind of the final form of hydroponics and controlled environment agriculture, where it gets to, there are some really awesome companies that have facilities that are like 40 acres. For example, ours is about 1.5 acres. But at 40 acres, you really need to be super precise with all of your automation, making sure that equipment works, making sure all of your watering systems work, and having really, really good growers that can go and test, let's go look at the nutrients in this plant on this side of the greenhouse versus the other side of the greenhouse. What's the difference and why is that? Do we need to adjust the recipe that we feed the plants? Do we need to change the temperature? And we kind of, we like to joke that we're always really like riding the knife's edge of growing plants like super well and super high yield efficiency. But because of that, mistakes can be really big. And so ensuring that, your watering system doesn't go down overnight, you could lose a whole crop. You could lose, hundreds of thousands of dollars of product if a system fails. So making sure that all of the equipment works, but again, combined with that knowledge of the crop, of the plants, of how to be a lower tech grower is really important. It's something that we focus on.
Thank you, Gus, for giving us that insight, and even down to like the partnerships with other retailers and how with the sales side of it and how you guys have it down to a science. That is super cool. And, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about something near and dear to my heart. So let's talk about food insecurity. Our last episode, we actually had a conversation with Eddie Oliver, who is the executive director of the Federation of Virginia Food Banks. So we learned a lot about the need here in Virginia. And Greenswell Growers, y'all partner with Feedmore, which is a Richmond-based food bank, and you guys donate your greens there. So tell us more about that partnership and how it got started.
Yeah, it's actually almost like the reverse, where the need for it is actually what started our company. So about 10 years ago, our founder was interested in starting a new business. I think he had retired from his long-term career, and so he had some side projects he wanted to get off the ground. And he was friends with the then CEO of Feedmore, Doug Pick, and they spoke about, what are the challenges that operating the Richmond Food Bank, Feedmore, was facing. And Doug said the biggest challenge was getting fresh produce. Canned goods, shelf stable, tons of people are able to donate that, and they have a lot of storage for that, and they can send that out easily. But any fresh produce is really challenging. Both the supply chains of like, where do you get fresh produce? Is it stuff that's being taken off the supermarket shelf? well, then you know it's already probably starting to go bad. And so by the time it goes through processing and gets to a customer, it might not be ready to eat. And so Doug said, hey, look, I have challenged getting fresh produce. And the other founder, Chuck Metzger, he said, okay, I know there is a need in the community for fresh produce. And I think that there is a business case here that we can also make some money while we are helping to feed the community and support them in a variety of ways. And so that was really the start. And so since our founding, since the first product that we've grown, we have always made sure to donate 5% of our yield to Feed More. To this day, I think earlier this week, we donated 4 or 5 pallets. And it always works out for us really well because it gets our name out there into the community, which builds support for what we're doing here. And it also helps showcase our product and make sure that people are fed. And we really, really focus on community engagement. And just another plug of something that we love to do here is we run internship programs with the local high school. And so Goochland County High School has sent us interns most summers, sometimes during the year. And we really love working with these kids. Whether or not they're going to get into agriculture as a career, it's a great way to show them that, like, hey, this is a place that your food comes from. And so we get to build that community and, again, support our local economy, and by providing great food, hopefully support the local health economy as well.
Amazing work you guys are doing. And what role do you see hydroponics playing in addressing hunger?
Yeah, I love this question. It's something I've thought about for years. I think sometimes, again, I'm taking the industry insider perspective. Sometimes we feel like from the outside, there's a little too much focus on the producers of food, where a lot of food insecurity, my understanding is it comes from the distribution channels to get that food to people. And so, yes, we are providing through Feed More an awesome opportunity to get really healthful food to people who need it. But we think of our growing and our system and our community engagement to really like educate people about where food comes from. I think nowadays, especially, there is a lack of knowledge about where most of your food comes from. And so giving tours to different groups, giving tours to interested students, they can see like, hey, our food can be grown right here. And so maybe that sparks some knowledge about or an interest in the field. And so they want to open their own greenhouse when they get older. And another thing is having all this local fresh produce that lasts really long on the shelf means that it is easier to get to the end user. And so again, through Feed More, they're not throwing out our product because there's 1 or 2 rotten leaves out of every bag. They can keep that stuff in their cooler for a little longer and make sure it distributes out further. Hydroponics brings food locally. Controlled environment agriculture as well brings more food production local. And so that allows people to eat food that they know was grown well. And again, the shelf life lasts longer, so it can make its way to more customers.
And that part, local produce being grown, actually helps a lot. Like you said, with the less decay, right? The less time that things are going bad, the shelf life, even down to the packaging. From what I understand, even how some things are packaged can help improve that shelf life of the produce and keep it fresher longer. So when people get it, they're getting a fresh product. So thank you for touching on that. If someone were interested in hydroponics, you mentioned having the students work with you guys. You mentioned some other opportunities, even through education. But for you, for anyone, any listener, someone who maybe doesn't have that opportunity to go to school to learn about it, if they were interested in learning more, how would you recommend they approach it or even just get started?
I think this is probably the answer for everything about how do you learn something these days, but YouTube is an awesome resource. There is a lot of people that make hydroponic systems at home, and I really can't recommend, like YouTube enough. Like there's some really awesome content creators on there who make these systems, who can troubleshoot and help you understand how they work. Past that, there's some books out there. I can't name any off the top of my head. I'm looking at my bookshelf here, and I don't think people here need the the biostatistics manuals that I have. I'm sure there are some at-home hydroponics guides that you could find, but really, there's a lot of knowledge out there. And my recommendation to people always is you got to start somewhere. So just get yourself some seeds. Even if you're starting in soil, just start growing some plants. Get your hands dirty. Try to grow that green thumb and get some experience. And then when you're ready for hydroponics, watch some videos and learn as much as you can. And I do want to shout out J. Sarge Community College in Richmond and the local area, they have a horticulture program that is excellent. They have classes specifically on hydroponics, whether you want to pursue a career certificate or an associate's degree, or just take a single class. That's an awesome program. That would really get you started if you wanted to do something at home or even on the commercial scale.
Love it. And is there anything else that you would want our listeners to know that we may not have touched on yet today?
I just think I am a person who's so interested in food systems. And so, Adrienne, I know you are as well with your nutrition background. So it's an awesome mix. I think we approach from two different sides, but together you really get the whole picture. And so I just hope and really want to encourage people to like understand your food, where it comes from, how it affects your health. And, I know that's a personal ask of people, but I think it's just so critical for the health of communities that it's really important. I just hope more people get interested in this kind of thing, and hopefully more greenhouses go up, and we can support our local community and continue to do that.
I couldn't agree with you more, Gus. I'm 100% on board with that mission, man. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today and sharing so much knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
I'd like to thank Gus for joining us today. Listeners of CommonHealth know how passionate I am about access to healthy, nutritious food. I love opportunities like this to learn more about ways our food is grown and gets to us. At VCHA, we have a hydroponic system here, right at our office, and are exploring more ways to expand it. I'm feeling even more motivated after this conversation. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to CommonHealth, brought to you by the Virginia Community Healthcare Association. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to help support CommonHealth, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button, share it with others on social media, leave a 5-star rating and review, or visit our website at www.vcha.org.